All right, hello and welcome to First Bank's Center for Family-Owned Businesses webinar series. I'm Mike Vanderbilt and I'll be your facilitator. On to slide 2, we'll take a look at today's topic, which is all about navigating hidden transition dangers in your family business. And just a quick reminder, the lines are muted, but at any time, please send us your questions through the webinar tool. And at this time, I'm going to pass it over to the host of our program, Mr. Joe Ambrose. Joe, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Mike. Welcome. I'm Joe Ambrose, Executive Director of the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses. Through the center, First Bank takes a holistic view of family-owned enterprises and delivers services to them beyond traditional banking products. These services are centered on insight and advice that address the family component of family-owned businesses. It is my pleasure today to welcome Dr. Allie Taylor, Principal of Orange Kiwi Consulting in Irvine, California. Allie and I met through our mutual friend, Ed Hart, so thanks to Ed for that great introduction. Allie's PhD is in business psychology, and she brings years of practical experience to her insights into family businesses. Today, she will share her thoughts on the hidden risks in transitioning the ownership of a family business, how to identify and mitigate them. And now, without further ado, Dr. Allie Taylor.
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. So, first question I always get is, what the heck is an orange kiwi? So let's just get that right off the table. I was born and raised in Orange County, California, and my partner, husband, Andrew, is from New Zealand. Put those two together and you get an orange kiwi. With that out of the way, I want to transport us back to the year 1912. So imagine it's April 11th. And you're walking the streets of Southampton in the United Kingdom. It's a beautiful day. It's a warmer spring than you're used to, and you're so excited because you're about to board a luxury liner. Now, the owners of this luxury liner have been very careful in attending to every single detail. They have prioritized speed and luxury. They have not spared any expense to make sure that your voyage, your crossing would be timely and comfortable. And as you board, you look around and people are excited and they're hugging each other and they're cheering, and it's a beautiful day. And nobody at all is thinking about what's going to happen in 4 days' time on the Titanic. And what's going to happen, we all know the story. It's been told for the last several almost 110 years, this story has been told. So we know how it's gonna end. The interesting part, and where it relates to our story today, is it didn't have to end the way it did. And oftentimes, that's what I hear in family businesses. When we talk about the hidden dangers, they're there. We know they're there. And the implications of those hidden dangers and the unintended consequences that have to happen, or that happen, really don't have to, if we do a few things. So our journey today is really going to be helping you figure out how to navigate those hidden dangers so you can avoid the icebergs that are lurking in every family business. No one's immune. There are two family businesses in particular that come to mind. One of them was fantastic, very successful, scaling. The family was happy. Husband and wife worked in the business. Their oldest son worked in the business. The wife's mother worked in the business. A brother-in-law worked in the business, and they had a bunch of other employees working in the business. What they did was bought failing businesses in the packaging industry and turned them around and integrated them into an operating company, or sold off various parts of it if they didn't fit exactly. And this was going really, really well until the things below the surface destroyed both the business and the family. They didn't know what hidden dangers existed, and they didn't even know how to deal with them when they started to discover them. And then there's another business. This business, the people have very high emotional intelligence. They work diligently on continuous learning and improvement. They work as a collective unit, husband, wife, a son, close family friends, and employees and colleagues that they work with. And all of them focus on core values, creating clarity, doing the things that are necessary to really grow a healthy, thriving business. The story's not over on that one. We'll see how it unfolds. So what does this mean for you? When we think about a family business, I want to challenge you just to pause and reflect on your own journey, on your own business, and ask yourself which of these are the truth and which are the lie. So I'll pop them up for you. All family businesses have competitive advantages that are unavailable to non-family businesses. All family businesses involve interdependent, multifaceted, long-term personal and professional relationships. All family businesses are more successful when their leaders focus on building organizational capacity. That's the ability to achieve their mission and vision. And all family businesses exist in an ecosystem that makes it easy to successfully achieve significant transitions. And a significant transition is either selling the business, scaling through growth curves, or engaging in a family succession. Of those three, the hardest transition is definitely the family succession. So what do you think? Which one's the lie?
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and launch this as a poll. Again, identify which one you think is the lie, and I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. And just go ahead and click on your answer. We'll give you about 10 seconds or so. So of those options, which one do you think is the lie? And the answers are still rolling in here, so let's give it another few seconds here.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one, Mike.
It is. It is. Yeah, the numbers are changing. The numbers are changing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close it down here in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so I'm going to close that down, and let's share those results with you. And there you go. You can see them on screen. So we have a bit of a split, 22% with option 1, 17% for the second and third option. But the winner here seems to be the fourth option. What do you think?
That's really interesting. So the winner, the lie, is that all family businesses exist in an ecosystem that make it easy to successfully achieve a significant transition. Every single one of them. And can you see?
We're good. Yep, that's perfect.
Perfect.
That's perfect.
Awesome.
Yep.
Every single one of them can be a truth and a lie. All of them. So trick question, you're going to have to forgive me on that one. If I were going to pick one that were the lie, it is definitely the last one. The ecosystem that family businesses operate in does not make it easy to engage in successful transitions. And there are a number of reasons for that. The cautionary tale in the two businesses that I told you, the interesting thing about that is that there was something in common for the two of them. And what was in common was the two key players. In the first bit, or one of the key players. In the first business, it was a part of my life with my family and our family business, and my husband at the time and I ran it together, and the business destroyed our marriage and our family. I decided I never wanted that to happen again, so I was never going to go into business with any family ever again. I was going to go to school because I didn't want any family to have to go through it. And lo and behold, I'm now running two businesses. One's in the IT space with my husband and my oldest son. And my husband, I also run the consulting side, the work that I do as a business psychologist together with a number of colleagues, and one happens to be a very close friend. So it's been an interesting dynamic. And that ecosystem that we operate in that makes it so difficult is because there's not really a great way, there hadn't been a great way for us to understand the hidden dangers. No matter how many family businesses I worked with, that kept being true over and over and over. And for non-family executives who work in the family business, but they're not part of that ecosystem, it can be especially treacherous and dangerous. So we don't want to forget about them. What everybody in that ecosystem needs to make all four of those things truths are 4 things. The first one is that we need to, in order to realize competitive advantage, we have to create clarity. In order to sustain relationships, we have to build connectedness. In order to build organizational capacity, we have to give control. And that's a paradox. That's the one where most people stop and go, Allie, what? Are you crazy? Build capacity, give away control? No, no. If I'm going to build, I have to keep control. I know that pain firsthand. We'll unpack it a little bit more. I'll let you chew on it for now. But in order to build capacity, you have to give away control. And achieving these transitions requires nurturing commitment. So let's break those down one at a time. First, in order to achieve competitive advantages, we have to create clarity. In order to create clarity, we have to resolve complexity. Clarity tells people why their efforts matter, how goals will be achieved, what is required, and how to succeed. There's a lot of research that says when people have clarity, when they have a why to hold on to, and they know the what they're fighting for, they actually have resilience that's needed to weather difficult times. I don't know, like maybe a pandemic we've just gone through. But without clarity, significant transitions get really tough because people have competing priorities and different agendas, and they don't know what winning really looks like. And in family businesses, unlike for-profit businesses, we don't just have one bottom line that's called profit. We actually have another bottom line. It's called socio-emotional wealth, or the non-economic value that families derive by working closely together. And that's a key attribute for driving competitive advantages that non-family businesses don't have. So how do you create clarity? And that's where we found a lot of clients getting stuck early on. It's where I got stuck as an owner early on. It's where my family had so much of its conflict. We didn't even know what we were fighting about. The arguments on the table weren't really the arguments we were having. They were the arguments that we thought we could control and win. So what are those variables? Well, most of them land in the business domain. And this is where a lot of your ecosystem operates in, either in the business domain or the second one, the money domain. Between these two, there are about 15 variables, and it's where most advisors come alongside you. It's where most of your pain points will be. It's where most of your symptoms live. So back in 1980, Peters and Waterman were 2 McKinsey and Company consultants. They wrote a book called In Search of Excellence. And this book looked at companies that were really well run and what set them apart from companies that were not so well run. What they identified was this concept of organizational capacity. And they identified 7 key elements. And those key elements were divided into 2 components, the hard and the soft elements. The hard are strategy, structure, and systems. You can measure them, you can observe them, you can quantify them, and if you can do those things, the belief is you can more readily change them. But then they found these other 4 things. These other 4 things were soft things, people things. They were staff, your fixed overhead. They were skills, the skills that may live in your staff, or the skills that you may bring in temporarily from the outside from time to time. And there was something called style and shared values. And they had to be really clever, so everything does start with S. And they also didn't know what they didn't know back in 1980. They didn't realize that style and shared values were culture. But what they discovered that was so pivotal was that these hard elements and these soft elements actually have to be in balance, because if they're not, the soft elements will make it impossible for you to achieve success. And what we have in these 15 variables, we do have hard elements and we have soft elements. Well, every single one of these point to when family businesses are wrestling through complexity and uncertainty and ambiguity, is they're wrestling at the symptom level. The problems that they're dealing with are almost never at this level. They're below. They're the hidden dangers that are happening below the surface. The things they don't know, the family dynamics. And so when people come to us and they ask us the question, what makes family business so hard? Or when we ask them, what makes your family business so hard? The answer is pretty straightforward. We say, well, the hard stuff is difficult, but it's the soft stuff that's even harder. And then we get this blank look come across their face. And I'm like, what in the world does that mean? What in the world does that mean? So I want to take you back aboard the Titanic. And it's your first night at sea. It's great. You've had one stop. Life is lovely. You're dancing. The champagne's flowing. You're in the first class cabin. You paid $4,350 for this cabin. Be about $120,000 in today's dollars. But even second class is really well. Third class is really well. Even what they called steerage or fourth class. They were having a great time. They were on a dynamic boat that had the latest technology, that had every accommodation, every luxury. Life was great. It wasn't hard because things were going really, really well. And everybody was in great space. People were happy. They were enjoying themselves. And they weren't attending to the hidden things that were below in the iceberg. They were just present in the moment because things were going well, so those hidden things didn't matter. What we know in family businesses, in the first one in particular that I worked with, it was the things in the self-domain that really took us down. It was things like motivation and values. Competing priorities right there alone are incredibly complex for most families. Even if we grow up in the same family, doesn't mean we always share the same values. We have generational differences. We have differences in experience. When we grow up and get married and bring a spouse into the family, they come with their own set. And now we've got to reconcile all those. We have personality dynamics, relationships, leadership, health, faith, legacy. It starts to get incredibly complex. The symptoms that we see, the pain points that people come with are always going to be in those 15 variables in the money or business domain. The solutions are going to be found in the self domain most of the time. And that's because our hidden dangers are not always observable. We can see what's happening in the business. We can see whether or not we're hitting our targets and goals if we have a documented strategy and if we have systems, if we have the clarity we need to cascade strategy through the organization, if we understand how to use HR as a business partner to hire and select the right people to shape culture. What we can't tell is what's happening below the surface. What's happening below the surface, this is where root causes are. Our beliefs, our values, our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts. And that's what makes the self-domain so important for creating clarity. And the equation for creating clarity is very simple. If you want to achieve a successful transition, you have to decide what your future state looks like, what your current state looks like, and then what the gap is. And as long as you create clarity in all three of these, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it means it'll be easier, particularly if you don't leave out the self-domain. What it allows you to do then is harness the power of the snowflake effect. The snowflake, they all form from a single crystal, and that's the business. And then they radiate and create all kinds of unique dynamic shapes, with the center being the most tightly connected. And then as you go out, there's often a little bit more freedom and flexibility. But this concept of interdependent independence and people wanting agency and autonomy, yet being willing to submit to the needs of the business, is a really challenging space to create clarity in. unless we focus on the self domain and how it shapes decision making through the money and business domains. So creating clarity is incredibly important. So let me ask you before we go on, what is the most common obstacle to creating clarity in your business? And I think, Mike, we have another quiz.
There we go. So it's popping up on screen now. Again, what is the most common obstacle to creating clarity in your business? Your options are underdeveloped strategic planning processes, leadership silos, conflict, or culture, underdeveloped skills. So let me go ahead and give you just about 10 or 15 seconds to mark your selection. All right, looks like we still have some answers rolling in here. We're gonna give you another few seconds here. All right, and I'll shut it down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so let me go ahead and close that and share those results with you. So a bit of a split here, but as you can see, it's the leadership silos and underdeveloped skills are tied for that top spot.
Got it. Yeah, and not so ironically, those are usually the top two. Okay, so yeah, underdeveloped skills is definitely one that comes up a lot, and leadership silos. And just like on the Titanic, when the business is booming and family is fabulous, you have at least enough resilience that it maybe doesn't matter, or you can overlook it. And then we start to hear things like, the business would be great if it weren't for all the family, or the family, this is the worst one, would be great if it wasn't for the business. So what do you have to do first? Do you correct underdeveloped skills? Do you correct leadership silos? Do you start to go through a strategic planning process and learning the development plans for your people? Maybe. It could be a chicken and the egg conversation. But if you do either of those things, you're going to be chasing symptoms. Not that they're not important, but you got to look below the surface. What caused you to get there? Is it personality styles of the leaders that value goal achievement, or is it not knowing what you don't know? By doing a future state, current state gap analysis and asking yourself some of those hard questions on the 22 variables in all 3 domains, that gives you a better idea of where to start creating clarity. So again, a little bit of a trick. You're probably getting used to this. Those questions are a bit of a trap because there's not one right place to start. The key is, it's like a ball of yarn, a bowl of spaghetti. You just got to pick one. And the questions you want to ask, instead of just looking at the symptom you're experiencing, start asking why. 5 layers deep. Keep asking why until you really understand what's at the heart of that. Are we afraid to have difficult conversations? Are we afraid to call out family members who are in roles that they shouldn't be in? And when you create clarity, it allows you to lean into something even more powerful, and that's building connectedness. The reason we often have underdeveloped skills or silos or leadership issues or conflict is because we haven't attended to the relationships. As I mentioned earlier, the single biggest competitive advantage family businesses have is socio-emotional wealth. And and it's such a powerful force that family members and loyal staff will double their efforts, double their sacrifice, and hold on to it, even when doing so isn't in their best interests. So the pandemic is a great example. Family businesses that we worked with, we could literally split into 2 camps. They either had a family that pulled together, that did whatever it took to sacrifice and to fight through, and those that started to tear each other apart because they hadn't done the work. They had low socio-emotional wealth, and the stress caused them to start to have mean-spirited personal attacks way, way too early in the process. So how do we build connectedness? Why don't we have it? Well, this concept of socio-emotional wealth starts with you and who you are and how you see yourself. Identity is such a powerful force that it's like the old story with the lion and the thorn in his paw. Hurting people hurt people. Hurting people hurt people. When you have a thorn in your paw, when you don't like yourself, when you're not allowed to exercise your autonomy and your agency, when you feel trapped, when you don't feel valued, when you don't feel heard, when you feel small, your identity is very weak and vulnerable. And anger and lots of toxic emotions start to dominate. But when you're in a family business that helps you be the best you, that really understands and allows you to flourish, then you want to be connected with other people. You will sacrifice. You don't fight for yourself, you fight for something bigger than yourself. You're not focused on your pain, you're focused on purpose and passion. So if you have high conflict in your family business, if you have silos, if you have underdeveloped skills, if you have people that aren't working together well, I suspect as I started to talk about identity, people started to pop into your mind that maybe aren't behaving the way you'd like. Something's happening for them below the surface. And empathy is the greatest, most powerful force you can use to reach out to those people. Perspective taking, walk a little bit in their shoes. Try to imagine what they're thinking and feeling. Try to understand what their needs are. Seek first to understand before being understood. And whenever we work in a family business, if we go back to that snowflake effect, it's never about the individual. We may have an individual come, they're the identified patient or the presenting problem, but it will be the family system. So our identity is formed in a family system. How we value ourselves, how we make decisions, what motivates us, formed in the family system, and the stories that we tell. Stories shape identity. Stories give us the desire to be connected to others or make us feel like we're on the outside. What are the stories you tell about each other in your family business? You can't know the tree by its leaves alone. You must also study the roots. How have those stories cascaded through your family through the years? Which ones do you want to hold on to and are good for you? Which ones do you maybe need to let go of? So in the first family business, there wasn't a lot of mutual respect. And I held on to the belief that I wasn't valuable and I wasn't ever going to be good enough. And those stories came out of my childhood. Even though I excelled, if I didn't perform the way my family expected, there was blame and shame. And that was just a generational thing. It's the way you motivated people back then. It no longer served me. And once I got free of that and started to understand, it allowed me to reshape my identity. And I see this happen over and over and over for my clients. Once they stop running from the pain, because it's not an easy journey. And what people are often fighting for is this need for control. As human beings, we have an innate drive to control our own destiny. We have a need for significance. We have a need to feel competent and effective in the world. And we often believe that the way to do that is holding on to control. And then there are these personality drivers for entrepreneurs. These are great because they're the things that help you be successful as an entrepreneur. But they're also things that these same personality traits become weaknesses. And of the 5 of them, the need for control is the one that is absolutely essential. And you talk to a room full of advisors and you bring this up and they're like, oh yeah, every owner I work with, need for control. Yes, duh, of course. If they didn't have a need for control, they couldn't push past barriers and obstacles that crush other people, other businesses. But what they're really talking about is this need for control keeps owners stuck in being able to think that the tighter they hold on to it, the more likely they are to continue being successful. And that's where the strength becomes a weakness. And there are studies that help us understand this. So Noam Wasserman out of Harvard did some great research a few years ago. He took young businesses and old businesses in the tech space because they're the fruit flies of the business world. That means they have very fast life cycles. And what he did is he looked at what happened to owners who maintained ownership but gave up control. So those that kept CEO and board control on the right, all the way through to gave up board and CEO control on the left. And what he found is it didn't matter whether they were young businesses or old businesses, but the share of company valuation doubled when they gave up control. And the difference in the dollar amount, older businesses, they've been around longer, they have a bigger customer base, bigger market share, so they made more money, but it did not correlate with control. The variable that correlated with control was the increase in enterprise value. And that was really interesting because it didn't make sense. These entrepreneurs are the ones with the great ideas that come up with all these things, that build the business in the first place, that do the nearly impossible. And what he found is people didn't care. Owners don't do this to get rich. They often do it to be king. And I take a little issue with that because I don't think they actually want to be king. I think they're actually wired to lead differently, to be differently. Entrepreneurs don't make great employees most of the time. They have this personality wiring that drives them to create and innovate. And that requires having a bit of control. So what does that mean for a family business where we've got personality traits and values and motivations that are penetrated throughout different family members? And what happens when identity is shaped as we grow up together? What does that all mean for control? Well, Mark Twain probably said it best. Familiarity breeds contempt and children. Maybe not best. Maybe William Hazlitt said it best. Though familiarity may not breed contempt, it takes the edge off of admiration. And even in the healthier families, that's true. And the unhealthy families where there's a lot of dysfunction, Twain is absolutely right. So what do we do with this? Familiarity is not a benign concept. What it does is it's human nature. We like the status quo. Once we go through something, once we think we know something, we like to put it in a box because we have so much incoming data and information into our brains, we can't possibly revisit everything. But allowing familiarity to be the thing that keeps you from being connected to your family and keeps you from creating clarity, that just isn't going to get you where you want to go. And the challenge is, in order to let go of this need for familiarity, it means you also have to start to look at yourself and your own identity. You allow yourself to grow and change. Can you let go of control and reframe your view of somebody else and recognize that they're also growing and changing? That's actually one of the hardest things family businesses do. Even with their management teams that are non-family, they grow up together. And sometimes the other side of this familiarity is that we have homegrown skills and talent that we're close to, we know them, so we confuse familiarity with trust, and so we keep people around in roles that are not able to grow and scale. This whole stew that we've been talking about, the need for clarity and connectedness, the need to let go of control, this concept of how familiarity plays out and keeping us stuck into holding on to control. Well, it's one of the things that keeps businesses from scaling through growth barriers. And this growth curves come from data from the US Economic Census in 2017, but the percentages are pretty consistent, even back 2012 earlier censuses. Today we do have more businesses, or at least in 2017 we did. We had 31,720,139 businesses in the US. 96% of those businesses will be lifestyle. They never get above $1 million. Only 0.16% ever get above 30 million. And today, 0.000058% are above 100 million in annual revenue. There's about 1,903 as of the 2017 economic census. And what's happening here is these chaos moments where it requires us to create clarity, to resolve complexity, to lean into people, to use connectedness or relationship, let go of control to be able to scale through these barriers is something that is very, very difficult. It requires intentional effort. It requires skills as you increase in size and complexity of your business. Different skills are needed, and we have homegrown talent, whether it be our own or our staff and management team or our family members. Homegrown talent will only get you so far, and there are times where you have to let go of control if you want to scale. And it's all a matter of perspective and the lens that you're looking at the world through. So what do you see?
The question is, what do you see? And the options are a young woman, an old woman, or unknown age. So in that last photo there, what is it that you saw? This is interesting. It was pretty even until the last couple of seconds. All right, so let me close it down now and share the results. So the results, 62% saw the young woman, no one saw the old woman, and then 38% said unknown age.
Interesting. Okay. So let's see if we can't get this going a little more seamlessly. How's that, Mike?
Perfect.
Awesome. I love it. So take a look at it again. If you saw the young woman, if you look at her ear and imagine that's an eye, and her necklace is a smile, do you see the old woman now?
So I'm one of those who saw the young woman and not the old woman, but now that you say it, I see the old woman.
And the other eye is a nose. Or the nose is another eye, or a wart on the nose of the older woman. Yeah, and here's the thing about that. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So once you see both, you can't go back to not seeing both. And that is the power. Once you give up control and you see the world differently and you start to experience the reality that the more control you give up, the more you create clarity, the more you create connectedness, the more you give up control, the more you actually have control over your own life and your business decisions, the less stress you have. And the reason we hold on to control is because we're afraid of what will happen if we don't. And that creates a ton of stress. So how do we get over that one? So now if we're going to realize competitive advantages, we have to create clarity. If we're going to harness and sustain relationships, we have to create connectedness. If we're going to give up control, what does that mean? How do we do these? Like, that's a lot already right there. Across 22 variables, I'm going to trust all these people? Aren't I the only one who can do this? And I'm really exaggerating. But I have clients all the time who, whether they articulate it or not, that's where they get stuck. And here's the thing. If you do that, you will nurture commitment. And giving control allows you to build organizational capacity. When you nurture commitment, now people are going to start to take ownership of their roles, so you don't have to think for them. Create clarity, build connectedness, give control, nurture commitment. So commitment to the family business, this can be, the lock is a little provocative because it can happen in two ways. One, out of passion, because our identity is grounded and we feel really good about being a part of something bigger than ourselves. That something is the business. That we're there because of passion. The other way commitment gets stuck into a business is through conscription or being drafted into service. That kind of commitment isn't great. So this whole balancing act of what does it mean to be a family member? If my identity is tied to the family, who will I be if I exit? Am I conscripted or am I passionate? Can I free myself to choose to be my best self, my healthiest self, so that I can find my passion, whether it's inside or outside the business? Can the family nurture commitment and still give people freedom to leave if they need to? That's often a challenging question. So let's talk about how we nurture commitment across generations. That's within management teams, within a current generation, and in between generations. There are 5 things here that we think about when we're talking about commitment. What we want out of the commitment is results. We want to be able to see the business doing what it is meant to be doing, and most people have that bottom line goal of also seeing the family healthy and strong and doing what it's meant to be doing, loving and caring for each other. In order to do either one of those things, we have to have accountability, and that means holding ourselves accountable and holding each other accountable. In order to do that, this whole notion of commitment has to be voluntary. Commitment does not, again, that is I led you down the garden path, because you can't nurture commitment if conscription's a part of it, if people are being forced and trapped into a business because they can't do anything else. That's not real commitment. In order to have accountability and get results, true commitment has to be present. And that means that we have to deal with this thing called conflict. And that means we have to build trust. And this is where it gets really sticky. So the Navy SEALs have a way of looking at this, and what they say is, do I trust you with my life on the battlefield? Or do I trust you with my money and my wife? What they're talking about is character and competency. And that's where trust gets really confusing for families, because we don't even look at it as character and competency alone. We equate trust with love. And it gets really confusing. And we're afraid that if we don't trust somebody, that might mean they don't think we love them. But it's just the opposite. We have to love them enough to be willing to let them go through pain without enabling them. We have to love them enough to help them pursue their own passion, their own joy, whether that's inside or outside the business. And to do that, we have to go through productive conflict. Artificial harmony is when we squash everything, stick it under the covers, ignore it, willful ignorance. We don't want to exist because we're afraid of what will happen if we actually have to acknowledge this thing. What that does, it's like a champagne bottle, shake it up hard enough, you swing over to mean-spirited personal attacks. Well, this notion of healthy, productive conflict is actually just to the right of center on those two. Harmony, this is one of the hidden dangers. So when the Titanic hit this sea of beautiful water, they described it as glassy, so glassy you could see the stars in the ocean. What they didn't acknowledge is that they were already in an ice field. The danger was all around them. They were going at 22 knots because they were valuing speed despite 6 warning signs. They did not slow down. The danger was all around them and they didn't deal with it. It's the same thing in family businesses. The danger is all around you. You're seeing it. And the longer you don't have to deal with it, the happier you are. You get to stay in first class dancing around the dance floor. You don't know when you're going to hit the iceberg. That's the scary part of it. And how you deal with that is by going ahead and not being willfully ignorant and engaging in this thing called productive conflict, which is actually a ton of fun because it's all about exploring different ways of looking at things. It requires social intelligence and emotional intelligence. It requires you to have other awareness and self-awareness. It requires you to be able to regulate your own emotions. This, if you're going to invest in anything to achieve those first 3 attributes, Nurturing commitment by focusing on creating productive conflict, by building emotional intelligence in your family and in your management team is the #1 recommendation. Because if we're going to have commitment across the generations, we can't be afraid to have the difficult conversations. We can't be afraid to look at all 3 of those domains and determine which one of those things could be our hidden danger that we have to navigate. Creating clarity, we have to assess the gap. 22 variables. We have to know where we are today, where we want to go, and what that gap looks like. We have to really focus on shaping the narrative in our family, valuing each other's identity, valuing self before others, seeking to understand before being understood. We have to empower the team. We have to let go of control. We can do that because we have clarity. Everybody knows where we're going. We've agreed on it. We've created alignment. We're connected. And this allows us to have commitment where we can champion passion. Navigating the hidden dangers in your family business won't happen by accident. So I'm going to challenge each of you as we shift into a time of Q&A. I'm going to challenge each of you to think about one thing you could do differently leaving this webinar, either with a client or within your family business, that will help you identify the gap, shape the narrative, empower the team, or champion passion. Thanks for being with us. Mike?
Alrighty, thank you so much for that presentation. And as a reminder, folks, you can ask a question. Just go ahead and type it right into the webinar tool, and we'll go ahead and ask that question live. And I think Joe's got a couple queued up here.
Ellie, I do. Thank you for an amazing presentation. I knew it was going to be great, and you exceeded those high expectations. And on the screen right now, if people would like to get in touch with Allie, please write down her contact information and feel free to follow up with her. Questions that popped into my mind. If the current generation doesn't start the dialogue on transitioning the ownership, how do the kids step up and start that conversation? Because that can be a very difficult conversation. That's your mom and dad you're talking to about this.
Yeah. You definitely, most often the kids come and they're not Machiavellian in doing that, right? They're not looking to steal the business from them, but they really do want to know, how do I prepare myself and how do I prepare them? How do I do this well and honor them? How do we have the hard conversations? And it's going to sound overly simple, but it really is. Just ask mom and dad. Like, call them up, invite them to dinner, and just ask what they want. What are you thinking about? What gives you joy and satisfaction, significance? Do you want to run the business until you don't anymore, until you can't, or do you want to go into retirement? And it's really interesting because a lot of times the now generation wants to exit, but they don't want to burden their kids with it, and they don't know how to do the handoff. So just starting the dialogue, figure out the narrative you want to shape together.
So if you're the parent, how do you decide which of your kids takes the business over? Is it the one that asked the question, or is it, or is it the one who doesn't? Which one is it?
Yeah, that's great. So here's where it gets really interesting. There's no one right answer for every family, and it will come down to the values and the family norms. So what expectations have you set based on your values for your kids? If you haven't done any of it, then you're going to have to wrestle with, what does fair mean? Is fair equal or is fair equitable? If it's equal, you're going to divide the business equally. You have to look at what that means for mom, management, ownership, and money. Can you really be equal? Or is it going to be equitable? People who have been working in the business, they got a salary for their sweat contribution, for their hard work. The kids not in the business are going to get the same ownership. Should the kids in the business get a little bit more ownership? That's a values conversation that the family has to wrestle with. The key there is to don't focus on the task or the goal, and let advisors will want to give you all kinds of legal structures and all kinds of mathematical solutions. That will take you in the wrong path. You have to start with values and having conversations with all of your kids about what's important to them and what's important to you. And then you'll get the answer. It really, I know that sounds simple, but those conversations do help us understand what's important to each other.
Harkening back to your tree analogy during your presentation, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago.
Yes.
But where do you start? Here we are today, trees not planted. How do you start this process?
Ball of yarn and a bowl of spaghetti. Pick a string. Literally, one of the funnest things that I do is get together with a family. We do a family retreat. They can all put their ideas on a piece of paper of what's important to them, they want to talk about. We put in a bowl and we pick it out and we just start having a conversation. You start that and it's going to start to unravel. All kinds of conversations are going to come out. And it's really insightful because we get to learn history of our parents that we never did. We get to learn about things that our kids care about that we had no idea just by having the conversation. The other piece of it is creating clarity in the business, really critical for capacity. So a number of times we'll go in, there is no strategy that's documented. There is a strategy, it's just not documented. There's no way of creating clarity for how you onboard children into the business, for how kids don't know how to read financial statements. So I would balance these soft conversations with some hard skills and see who rises to the top there, who's actually got the leadership capacity to take this business forward.
Allie, this has been an amazing hour. We're getting close to the end. Unfortunately, I could listen to you all day, and we did. We had a great lunch in Irvine on Tuesday, so thanks again for meeting with me in person. Next month, we have Jim Del Carmen from Collaborative Strategies talking on the subject of strategic planning for family-owned businesses. So it's unintentional follow-up, but I think it's a great follow-up to what Allie has shared with us today. So I think we need to draw to a close, unfortunately. Thank you so much for your time today and a terrific presentation.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks all.